She scrimped and saved for months, clipping coupons, skipping dinners out, passing on new clothes, just to surprise her daughter's family with a $37,000 luxury Christmas vacation. A private villa, first-class flights, personalized tours, everything. But days before Christmas, her daughter casually mentioned, "This year, it's just us, our little family." No invitation, no gratitude, just exclusion. So the mother canceled everything, every dollar gone, in silence. And when the daughter found out, oh, that Christmas morning was unforgettable, but not for the reasons she expected. Have you ever given your all to someone, only to be cast aside like you never mattered? If this story strikes a nerve, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of quiet revenge and deep resilience. My name is Claire. I'm a widow, and I live in a small, modest home just outside Asheville, North Carolina. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave, the air smells like pine trees, and quiet mornings stretch out like warm blankets. I've lived here since my husband passed away 8 years ago. He was my partner, my rock, and when he died, my world shrank down to just one person, my daughter, Lindsay. Lindsay was everything to me. I poured myself into raising her, every lunch packed, every homework assignment reviewed, every recital, every scraped knee, every broken heart. I was there. I sacrificed a lot, more than most people knew. I never remarried. I never even dated. I worked long hours as a bookkeeper, took on extra shifts during tax season, and lived on the kind of budget that made every penny count. But I never minded. Because I had a reason. I had her. When Lindsay went off to college, I cried for a week. But I was proud. She was smart, driven, and kind. At least she used to be. After graduation, she moved to Atlanta and got a job in marketing. That's where she met her husband, Brandon. He's successful, comes from money, drives a Tesla, plays golf on Saturdays, says things like legacy planning at dinner. I never disliked him, but I never quite fit into their world either. At first, we still had our mother-daughter bond. She'd call me on her lunch breaks, send pictures of the new apartment, invite me down for the holidays. But slowly, things changed. She got busier. Her texts became shorter, her tone less warm. Our conversations started to feel like obligations. By the time she got married, I could sense it clearly. I was no longer central in her life. I was orbiting. Still, I kept showing up. I visited when invited, sent thoughtful gifts, never missed a birthday or anniversary. And I never complained, even when I felt like a guest in the life I helped build. That's when the idea came to me last spring. I wanted to do something big for them, for all of us. Something that would bring us closer, a grand gesture of love and togetherness. A Christmas vacation. Not just any vacation. A luxury trip to the Amalfi Coast in Italy. 5-star villa overlooking the sea. First-class flights. Private car service. Custom tours of Pompeii, Capri, and Naples. Cooking classes with Italian chefs. I wanted it to be unforgettable. Something Lindsay and Brandon would never expect and never forget. I spent 6 months planning it, quietly, secretly. I used money I'd saved over the years, some from my late husband's insurance, the rest from countless skipped indulgences. No new roof for the house, no replacement for the old washer that screeched. I even pulled from the rainy day fund I kept tucked in a fireproof box. It added up to $37,000. Every dollar spent with one thought in mind, making Christmas magical again. I worked with a travel concierge. Every detail was perfect. I even had personalized itineraries made for Lindsay and Brandon. I pictured their faces when I'd hand them the envelope on Christmas Eve. I imagined the laughter, the hugs, the excited packing. I imagined being a part of their joy. But as December approached, I started to feel something off. Lindsay wasn't calling. She didn't ask if I'd be coming down for the holidays. When I finally asked her, casually, about Christmas plans, she paused, hesitated, then said, "Oh, we're keeping it small this year. Just us. You know, me and Brandon. Maybe next time?" I didn't react. Not outwardly. I told her I understood. I said it was fine. But inside, something cracked. Something deep. Something that had been held together by years of grace and patience. Because here's the thing, when someone draws a line between you and family, you hear it loud and clear. I went home that night and sat in my living room, surrounded by wrapping paper and travel documents. I stared at the glossy images of that Italian villa. I thought about the pasta we'd never eat together, the sunsets we wouldn't watch, the laughter that would never happen. And then I realized I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was done pretending I didn't see it. She had drawn her boundary. It was time I drew mine. The next morning I made myself a pot of coffee, the kind I used to save for special occasions. I sat at the kitchen table, the travel folder still there, untouched from the night before. I opened it slowly, flipping through each page, the flight confirmations, the villa photos, the itinerary printed on thick ivory paper with gold-embossed names, Lindsay and Brandon Williams. And not once did I see Claire on any of it. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about all of us. It became about making them happy, hoping they'd let me in. I thought I was building a bridge, but I was just decorating a gate they'd already locked. I stared out the frosted window, watching a few brown leaves skip across the driveway. The quiet of winter can be comforting, or it can crush you. That morning, it crushed me. A few hours later, Lindsay called. She never called in the morning. "Hey, Mom," she said, her voice chipper, like we hadn't just had that awkward conversation the day before. "I wanted to check in. Are you good for watching Daisy next week?" Daisy. Their golden retriever. I paused. I swallowed. "You mean, over Christmas?" "Yeah, just for a few days," she said breezily. "We'll drop her off the 23rd, pick her up the 27th. You don't mind, right? She loves your yard." My chest tightened. Not only was I excluded from Christmas, but I was being reduced to a dog sitter. "Lindsay," I said slowly, "you do realize that you and Brandon, you didn't invite me for Christmas." A beat of silence. Then, "Mom, come on. It's not personal. We really want to have a quiet holiday. You know, just us. We've been so busy. It's a time for our little family to recharge." Our little family. There it was again, that invisible wall, and I was firmly on the other side of it. "I see," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, then I suppose Daisy should stay with your little family too." She laughed, like I was being cute. "Mom, don't be like that." "I'm not being like anything," I said, more sharply than I intended. "I just think it's time I stopped pretending I'm part of something I'm clearly not." That ended the call. No apology, just a tight "fine," and the line went dead. I sat there, still holding the phone, heart pounding. That was the moment I knew something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just a holiday oversight. This was years of silent hurt rising to the surface. I remembered the birthdays where I waited by the phone, the times I drove 3 hours to visit, only to be told they had brunch plans. The Mother's Day gifts that arrived late, or not at all. The way Brandon always introduced me to his friends as Lindsay's mom, like I was a guest speaker at some networking event. And I thought, what have I been doing? Why have I bent over backwards, sacrificed, smiled through tears, just to be tolerated? No more. That night, I pulled out my laptop and logged into my travel account. One by one, I began canceling the reservations. The villa, gone. First-class tickets, refunded. The private car, the chef, the tours, all erased with a few clicks. Each cancellation felt like breathing a little deeper, like reclaiming something. The grand total refunded? Almost all of it. $36,400 back into my account. Funny thing is, the loss didn't hurt. It was the plan that had hurt, the belief that I had to buy my way back into my own daughter's life. But I didn't stop there. The next morning, I called the concierge who had helped me design the trip, a lovely woman named Paula. "Can you do me a favor?" I asked. "Of course," she said, "anything." "Can you send a cancellation notice to my daughter's email? I want her to know what could have been." There was a pause. "You want me to include details?" "Yes," I said, "all of it." And so, on Christmas morning, at precisely 8 o'clock a.m., Lindsay would receive a beautifully worded email titled, "Holiday Itinerary Cancellation Notice, Amalfi Coast Experience." A digital stocking full of reality. It wasn't petty, it was a message, a mirror, a quiet but firm reminder. You don't get to treat people like they don't matter and still reap the rewards of their love. I didn't cry after that. I didn't even feel sad. What I felt was clarity. And in that clarity, I decided something else. This year, Christmas wouldn't be about chasing love, it would be about protecting dignity. The beauty of a quiet life is that no one ever suspects you're capable of disruption. After the call with Lindsay, I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't even rant to a friend. I simply went about my day, as if nothing had happened. But beneath that calm surface, I was sketching out a very precise plan, not out of anger, but out of truth. They had made their choice. I would make mine. That evening, I pulled out the trip folder once more, not to mourn it, but to dismantle it piece by piece. The first step was canceling the villa, a seaside property just outside Positano, perched on a cliff with whitewashed balconies and lemon trees. I had paid in full months ago. Luckily, the company had a generous cancellation policy, thanks to the concierge I'd worked with, Paula, who had insisted I add travel protection. I called her directly. "Paula," I said, "I need to cancel everything." There was a long pause. "Everything?" she asked gently. "Yes. The villa, the flights, the entire itinerary. And I want confirmation emails sent. One to me, and one to my daughter." Another pause. "May I ask why?" I smiled softly. "Let's just say the guest list changed." Paula didn't ask further. She was professional, but I sensed she understood. She walked me through the cancellation steps, assuring me nearly all the funds would be returned. As she processed each booking, she asked one final question. "Would you like to keep any part of the itinerary for yourself?" It was the first time I paused. "No," I said. "Not yet, but maybe later." After we hung up, I sat in silence, letting the stillness wrap around me. The money, $37,000, wasn't what mattered. What mattered was reclaiming my place in the narrative. Over the next few days, I moved with deliberate grace. I cleared out my garage, something I'd been putting off for years. I baked cookies and donated them to the local shelter. I even volunteered to wrap presents at the community center. I wasn't distracting myself, I was grounding myself. But the final piece of the plan came on Christmas Eve. I had asked Paula to schedule the cancellation email to be sent at 8 o'clock a.m., sharp on Christmas morning. The subject line would read, "Your Amalfi Coast holiday itinerary, canceled." Inside, it would contain every detail: the villa name, the tour guides, the private driver, the wine tastings. It would also include the total amount paid and the full refund issued. I added a personal note at the end. "Merry Christmas, Lindsay. I had planned something beautiful for us, but it turns out I wasn't invited, so I uninvited myself and everything else." I signed it simply, Mom. I didn't send it in anger. I sent it in honesty. That night, I lit a candle in the living room, poured a glass of wine, and sat by the window watching the snow begin to fall. Not a flake stuck, but the way they danced in the air, it felt cleansing. I thought about the years I spent earning a place I already should have had, the holidays where I smiled through tears, the moments I gave without receiving. And I realized I wasn't punishing my daughter. I was removing the reward from her indifference. When someone constantly shows you how little they value you, the kindest thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is stop showing up with gifts. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. Not because I'd gotten even, but because I'd finally stood up, quietly, firmly, without apology. Christmas morning came quietly. The sun rose behind a curtain of pale gray clouds. My little street was silent, dusted in a thin layer of frost. I brewed my coffee, added a dash of cinnamon, just how I liked it, and sat in my armchair, blanket tucked over my legs, as the clock ticked toward 8 o'clock a.m., right on time. At exactly 8:03, my phone buzzed. A call from Lindsay. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom, what is this?" Her voice was sharp, frantic. "What did you send me?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "Merry Christmas to you too, sweetheart." "Don't play coy," she snapped. "What the hell is this email about a canceled trip? Amalfi Coast? Villa Serafina? Flights? Tours? Were you planning some surprise trip? Why would you cancel it?" I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them and stared out at the street. "Yes," I said calmly. "I was." "You're kidding me." "No," I replied. "I'm not." "But why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted it to be a gift," I said, my voice soft but steady. "A surprise. Something to bring us closer." She went quiet. Then, "You spent $37,000 and just canceled it?" "I did," I said. "After you told me Christmas was just for your little family." I heard her breathe in sharply, a mix of shock and something deeper, guilt maybe, or disbelief. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that." "No?" I asked, because that's exactly how it sounded. She was silent. "I've been generous, Lindsay, not just with money, with time, with love, with patience, but it's always been a one-way street. I was always giving, waiting for the moment you'd remember I was more than just someone who raised you. I was hoping you'd want me in your life, not just as a favor, but as family." "Of course you're family," she said quickly. "We were just overwhelmed this year. Brandon's work's been crazy and—" "No, Lindsay," I interrupted, my voice firmer now. "This isn't about schedules. It's about priorities. You wanted a holiday without me. That was your choice. I respected it. But don't be surprised when choices have consequences." She didn't yell. She didn't cry. For once, she didn't deflect. She just went quiet again. Then more softly. "So this was payback?" I paused. "No," I said. "It was clarity. You drew a boundary. I honored it. But I also removed the benefits that came with ignoring me." She exhaled sharply. "Brandon's going to be furious." "Let him be," I said calmly. "It was never about him." Another long pause. Then, with a touch of bitterness, "You really think this will bring us closer?" "No," I said. "I don't. Not anymore. I thought it would. But now, I just needed to show myself that I still matter. To me." That was the end of it. She mumbled something about needing to go and hung up. I didn't hear from her the rest of the day. But something in me, something tired and bent from years of bending, finally stood tall. I didn't need her to agree. I didn't need her to come crawling back. I needed space from the ache of being overlooked. That afternoon, I took a walk through the nearby trails, snow crunching under my boots. The trees stood tall and still, stripped bare but not broken, and I realized I had been like them, weathered by seasons, but still rooted. When I got home, I opened my laptop, looked at the travel refund sitting in my account, and smiled. The trip wasn't wasted. It became something else entirely, a turning point. The silence that followed Christmas morning was louder than any argument. No apology, no explanation, just absence. For days, I heard nothing from Lindsay. No calls, no texts, not even a belated Merry Christmas. The phone stayed silent, and I didn't chase it. I had done that enough in the past. This time, I let her sit with the discomfort. In those quiet hours, something settled in me. Not anger, not even disappointment, just understanding. I wasn't part of her idea of family anymore, not really. I had been useful, convenient, expected, but not wanted. And that truth? It no longer broke me. It freed me. But then, on New Year's Eve, she called. Her voice was controlled, too controlled, like someone rehearsing calm while holding back a storm. "Mom," she said, "can we talk?" I waited a second. "We're talking." "In person." I paused. "You want to come here?" "No. Brandon and we'd like to have lunch. Neutral ground." Neutral ground. What an interesting phrase for a daughter to use with her mother. Still, I agreed. We set a date, Saturday afternoon at a small cafe halfway between our towns. I didn't ask what she wanted to say. I didn't speculate. But I knew this wasn't about the trip anymore. This was about control, perception, appearances. When people who've always had the upper hand feel it slip, they scramble, not to repair the bond, but to reassert dominance. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I spent the next day preparing, not what I would wear or say, but how I would carry myself. Calm, measured, steady. I reminded myself that this wasn't about winning. It was about standing in my truth without flinching. I printed a copy of the itinerary, every page of it. Highlighted the canceled confirmations. I added the note I'd written her, the one she never responded to. I placed it all in a simple manila folder and set it on my entry table by the door. Not because I wanted to throw it in her face, but because I wanted to have it, just in case she pretended none of it happened. By Saturday, the sky had turned a dull pewter gray. Cold wind pushed dry leaves across the parking lot of the cafe as I pulled in. I wore my navy wool coat, the one Peter had given me the year before he died. It still smelled faintly of cedar and comfort. I held my chin high and walked through the door with quiet dignity. They were already there, Lindsay and Brandon, sitting side by side in a corner booth. He looked polished, smug even, with his blazer and scarf. She looked nervous, eyes darting from the door to the menu and back again. I slid into the booth across from them. No hugs, no pleasantries. "Thanks for coming," Lindsay said. I nodded. There was a beat of silence. Then Brandon leaned forward, voice too casual. "So," he said, "about this vacation situation." Vacation situation. That's when I knew. They weren't here to mend anything. They were here to regain control of the narrative, to make sure they looked good. Too bad for them. I didn't come empty-handed. Brandon leaned in like he was about to negotiate a business deal. "Look, Claire," he said, with that artificial calm people use when they think they're the smartest one in the room. "We were surprised by the whole situation. The email, the canceled trip. It seemed, well, extreme." Lindsay nodded beside him, lips pressed tight. "You blindsided us." I folded my hands on the table and looked directly at her. "I didn't blindside you. I responded to the fact that I was excluded." She shifted in her seat, avoiding my eyes. Brandon scoffed softly. "But to spend that kind of money and then just throw it away?" I tilted my head. "I didn't throw it away. I took it back." That stopped him for a second. "I planned that trip for months," I continued. "Not because I owed it to you, but because I wanted to give something meaningful. I thought maybe, just maybe, It would remind you that I'm still here, that I matter. Brandon crossed his arms. It just seems manipulative. I turned to him fully. Manipulative would have been surprising you on Christmas morning, pretending everything was fine, while secretly resenting you both. What I did was transparent, honest. Lindsay finally spoke. You could have said something earlier. I tried, many times. Do you know how many holidays I've spent waiting by the phone? How many moments I've excused your distance, told myself you were just busy, just stressed, just growing up? She swallowed hard but said nothing. I canceled the trip, I said slowly, because I realized I was planning a celebration for people who didn't think I belonged. Another silence. Then I pulled the folder from my bag and laid it gently on the table. Brandon raised an eyebrow. These, I said, tapping the documents, are the details of the vacation. Every tour, every booking, every reservation. I wanted you to see it, to really understand what you lost. Not the money, the intent. Lindsay opened the folder, her eyes scanning the pages. I saw her face change. Confusion, then recognition, then a flicker of shame. You were going to take us to Italy, she said quietly. Yes. A private villa. First-class flights, personalized wine tastings. I even arranged for a chef to cook with us on Christmas Day. Brandon looked at her. Why didn't you tell me she was planning this? She didn't answer. I leaned back. Because she didn't know. Because she didn't ask. For a moment, the air between us was still. No more defense, no more pretense. Then I said what I had been holding for years. Lindsay, I don't need expensive trips or grand gestures from you. I needed to feel like I was still your mother, not a background character in your perfect little life. I needed to feel seen. Her eyes welled up, but she blinked fast and looked away. Brandon sighed and stood. Well, I think we've said enough. He walked out, leaving Lindsay alone in the booth with me. She didn't chase him, didn't say a word. Instead, she looked at me with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Humility. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded gently. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. After the confrontation at the diner, I didn't hear from Lindsay for almost 2 weeks. No texts, no emails, just silence. At first, I thought maybe that was her way of processing, or maybe it was her way of retreating. Either way, I didn't chase her this time. I had done enough chasing for one lifetime. Instead, I began reclaiming the pieces of myself I had long put aside. I went back to the travel agent and officially rebooked the Italian villa for one person. I asked them to adjust the itinerary. Less family-friendly, more self-indulgent. A personal driver. Spa days. A photography tour through the Amalfi Coast. The look on the agent's face was priceless. I don't think I've ever seen someone cancel a trip and then take it anyway, she said, laughing softly. Let's just say the guest list changed, I replied. Back home, I made a few other changes. Subtle at first. I reorganized the living room. Got rid of the family portrait that had hung on the hallway wall for years, a reminder of a time that only existed in my memory, not in reality. Then I did something bigger. I closed the joint account I'd opened with Lindsay when she first moved out. I had been quietly covering overdrafts and helping with rent for years, under the radar, of course. But no more. That door was gently, respectfully, and permanently closed. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of respect. For myself. When Lindsay finally did reach out, her message was short. Can we talk? I replied, yes, when you're ready to talk as equals. We met again, this time at my house. She came alone, no Brandon. Her posture was different, not defensive, not proud, just present. She sat on the same couch where she used to watch Saturday cartoons, knees folded like a teenager again. For the first time in years, she looked around the room like she was seeing it, and me, through new eyes. "I've been thinking a lot," she said quietly. "I'm glad," I answered. She hesitated, then said, "I didn't realize how much I expected you to just be there, always, no matter what." I nodded. "That's what mothers do, until they can't anymore." She looked down at her hands. "Brandon doesn't get it. He thinks you were trying to make a statement, like it was about control." "Was it?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, it was about dignity." We sat in silence for a while. Not the heavy kind, the kind that lets air back into the room. "I want to fix things," she said finally. "Not just patch them, really fix them." I believed her. But I also knew forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It means moving forward, separately if necessary, but always with clarity. "I'm open to rebuilding," I told her, "but it has to be mutual. That means I won't keep giving just to be tolerated." She nodded. "I understand." We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat there, two women no longer pretending, finally learning how to speak without the noise of guilt, duty, or unmet expectations. It wasn't the mother-daughter moment I used to dream about, but it was something better. It was real. And that was enough. I took the Italy trip alone. I'll admit, the first few days were awkward. Eating alone at candlelit restaurants, walking along cobblestone alleys with no one to share the view. I caught myself reaching for my phone, wanting to text Lindsay a funny street performer or a strange local dessert, but then remembered we were still rebuilding, not rushing. By the fifth day, something shifted. I woke up early, stood on the balcony of the villa, and watched the sun bleed into the ocean like watercolor. There was no one beside me, no one to entertain, no one to impress. Just me. And that was enough. I had spent so many years being a mother, a fixer, a provider. But I had forgotten how to simply be a woman, a whole person. A person who once had dreams that didn't include sacrificing everything. In Positano, I met a retired French teacher named Marianne. She was in her late 60s, traveling solo after losing her partner. We shared wine, stories, and laughter that needed no translation. At one point, she said, "You carry something heavy in your smile." I blinked. "It's getting lighter," I told her. And I meant it. When I returned home, everything was quieter. But not in a sad way. Peaceful. Like a room finally cleaned out after years of clutter. I picked up my knitting again. Not out of boredom, but out of desire. I joined a local book club. I painted a wall in my kitchen deep forest green. Lindsay always hated that color. I didn't care. A few weeks later, I got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A letter. From Lindsay. She wrote about the apartment she and Brandon were trying to rebuild. How money was tight, but her mindset was shifting. She mentioned a therapist she'd started seeing. And she wrote this line that made me cry. "I know you love me, Mom, but now I want to be someone who deserves that kind of love." That was everything. We didn't magically become best friends overnight. That's not how real healing works. But we began again. Not from where we left off, but from where we really were. She started calling once a week, sometimes just to vent, sometimes to ask about a recipe, sometimes just silence on the line while she folded laundry. And I showed up, but differently this time. I didn't fix. I didn't fund. I didn't offer solutions unless asked. I simply listened. And in return, she began to see me, not as a backup plan, not as an emotional doormat, but as a woman. A human being with limits, with her own pain, and with a heart that chose not to give up. Now, when people ask me about Christmas, I smile. Not the bitter kind, not the forced polite one. A real smile. Because this past Christmas, I didn't cook a feast. I didn't decorate the house with nostalgic ornaments. I went hiking in Arizona, stayed in a quiet cabin, and called Lindsay on Christmas Eve. We laughed. We shared stories. We said, "I love you." And then we hung up, peacefully, without expectation. It took one broken tradition to create a better one. And maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes, healing doesn't look like a tearful reunion or a perfect ending. Sometimes it's a quiet shift, a steady breath, a decision to stop bleeding just to keep others warm. I chose myself. And for the first time in decades, that choice didn't feel selfish. It felt sacred.